Okay, well, welcome everyone. My name is Helen Dane. I'm an executive coach. I run a company called the Dane Group.
Yeah, and I'm Mary Mealy, and I'm a learning specialist and an education consultant, and I run Evolved Education. Thanks for being here.
So obviously, as the title suggests, we want to help you thrive. So I want to start off with just a little story. And I think as I tell this story, many of you are going to really connect with it. So let's see if we can go to the next slide.
Should I try it?
Yeah, give it a shot. There we go. So remember that moment when the world turned on its head and we started the stage 1 of quarantine? And a particular mom who had this feeling, holy bleep, how are we going to do this? She had to figure out a place for every member of her family to work, which was tight in a New York City apartment. Was trying to learn how to get on different platforms for her child's school, was trying to navigate her own work, and was obviously very anxious. Then she starts to get the hang of things. Her kids are doing some semblance of remote learning. She is having a few hours a day to focus on her work. And things are rocking and rolling, and then new changes come. And the kids are all stuck indoors. She's stuck indoors. Spouse is stuck indoors. And what she's noticing is those hours of work that she had are gone. And even when she does have time to work, it's consistently interrupted because somebody needs something. Where is this? How do I get on Zoom? How do I do this? And so she's noticing not only her productivity decreasing, her confidence decreasing, and she's starting to wonder, with the stock market crashing, with the economy tanking, what's going to happen to my career? What's going to happen to my kids? Where is this going? So we move on to stage 3. Get me out of here. I can't do this. I hate Zoom. I don't want to talk to anyone. And just a week before, she was having happy hour with every friend she hasn't seen in ages. And now there's moments of that, and that stage 3 and stage 2 go back and forth for her over and over again. And now she's at stage 4. We need to thrive through this. We don't know for how long, but it's no longer about survival. It's now about how do we thrive. And that's where she is. And that she is me. Is so many of my clients. It's not only moms.
Yes.
It's not only moms, it's dads as well. And we are here to give you some tips and tricks. And it's just the beginning. I think Mary and I struggled how to condense so much of what we've experienced with our clients, but we really want to help you. And that's what this webinar is about. And it's only the start of the conversation.
Great. I love that. So connected. This is us. So yes. So we just wanted to introduce ourselves in case you don't know one of us. A lot of you know one of us and not the other one. So it's good just to give you a little background. We won't inundate you with this too much, but essentially I am Mary Mealy, and I'm a longtime teacher, and I started Evolved Education about 5 years ago because I really wanted to develop a company that would professionalize the space of tutoring and school placement consulting. And 5 years later, in the early 2020 time period, I had come to a place in my company where I have now a staff of 4 or 5 people at this point, and we are starting the Evolve Teaching School, which is aimed to work with educators to teach them how to tutor and consult. So this has been a real pivot point for me, and I certainly actually thrive within learning and developing new programming to meet people's needs. It's a very comfortable space for me, but it's definitely been a challenge because I also have 3 children at home who are in 3 different schools learning all of the things they're learning. And I have a husband who has a big job as well. And so we have gone through all of the stages, and I can totally relate to everything Helen's talking about. So I'll pitch it over to Helen to introduce herself, and we're going to get right to it.
Yeah, very briefly, I'm an executive coach. I work with professionals, oftentimes working parents, in the setting of making sure that their career is progressing, that they're effective leaders, that their business is growing, and that they are really the best version of themselves. And I don't believe that you can separate professional from personal. When you feel like things are falling apart at home, it's very hard to show up as the best version of yourself professionally, and vice versa. So I'm really excited to do this with you guys. As a way of background, I come from Wall Street, so I was an institutional fixed income sales trader for over a decade before I became an executive coach. But let's get to the meat of the webinar. Let's start talking with each of you. And Mary, maybe you can tell us who's in the room.
Yeah, great. All right. So we have 50% of those people who took the poll are in corporate. We have 33% work for ourselves and 17% work for a small business. And we have a mix of ages of children here. So we have some children are ages 0 to 3, 44%. 4 to 6 years old is 17%, 7 to 9, 33, a pretty even now rest of the go. So we've got 7 to 9, 10 to 12, 13 to 15, and even 16 to 18. So that's a nice spread of age groups and everything for us to talk about. And then the major priority for everyone is to understand how to support their children at home. And then sort of second to that is staying mindful of being the best version of ourselves. So we're going to also, of course, cover being more visible and impactful at work and building stronger relationships at work. So everyone will be taken care of, but those are the priorities that are coming out. Yeah.
Awesome. So let's dive right in. Mary, do me a favor, flip to the next slide.
Hello, Mary Neely here.
Oh,
We're
shoot.
talking today
Sorry.
about
Something just
solutions to challenges that educators are having with
Uh-oh.
Okay.
Hello, Mary Neely here. We're talking today about
Forward.
It happens.
Here
Hey,
we
we're
go.
going to be talking about that.
Guess
Actually,
what, guys? So appropriate. Okay.
isn't this perfect? Don't sweat the small stuff. These things happen. They might happen to you at work, right? Like it's awkward now that we're doing remote work, remote learning, our kids are coming in. So I'm going to talk about that, but I want to talk about priorities first, because I think what often happens to us as we're navigating this new world is there are a million competing priorities. We have our business, or we have our jobs, we have our kids' education, we have our other members in the household's needs. And so what I want you to do now is actually, I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to do this exercise with you. And I want you to think in the grand scheme of things, where we are today in quarantine right now, assuming quarantine will continue for a couple more weeks at least, right? And we don't know what's going to happen with schools. Think about that. Think about your career, and just think about your total life and write out what are your top 3 priorities. So take a moment. If you don't have a pen and pencil because your kid stole it, use your iPhone. I know you have that by you, and just jot down what's priority number 1, what's priority number 2, and what's priority number 3. And if you're comfortable, go ahead and share one of your priorities in the chat so we can see what's coming up for you. What are those top priorities for each of you? Go ahead and put that into the chat. Now, I wanted to start off with this because as I mentioned, I'm a coach, and oftentimes one of the first things I do with people that come to me and say, I'm overwhelmed, I'm pulled in a million directions, or I'm not the best version of myself, since Mary mentioned that was a top thing, was I would bring them back to what's most important to you, right? And Susan's sharing with us, mental health and sanity, excellent, right? And maybe Susan, go deeper. What does that mean for you? What does mental health mean for you? What does sanity mean for you? And I did this exercise for myself after I went through stages 1, 2, and 3, and then back to 2 and back to 3. I realized that I needed a framework to start from every day. And one of the things that affects our mental health is decision fatigue. So if every 5 minutes, one of your children is coming and saying, "Can I have a cookie?" for example, you're having to make that decision every time. Do I say no and put up with a tantrum, or do I say yes and, not sweat the small stuff that they're having too much sugar? If you're constantly having to make that choice, then you are going to eventually start to get worn down. So maybe you have a framework for yourself, one cookie a day, or maybe you even tell your child that framework. And I'm using the child example because it's a simple one, but it's similarly for work. Because when we started living in this quarantine world, I had a way that I envisioned I should be working. And then with my kids around, with my spouse around, I realized that that way can't exist. And so I really created a new framework for myself, new world. What am I going to be okay with? What am I going to feel good about? And what I'm going to feel good about is different because now my priorities have shifted. So keep sharing with us. I see a couple of you are chatting what your priorities are. We're seeing some people sharing that providing stability for teenagers is important. Obviously health, that's without a doubt the most important, and hopefully all of you are healthy. But it's really important to set that. And you can use this exercise for any category. So I asked you to do the life one, but you can do that for, with regard to my children's development, what are my 3 priorities? With regard to my business, what are my 3 priorities? With regard to my career and my coworkers, what are my 3 priorities? So it's a really excellent exercise. And if anything I'm saying is, first of all, if it's registering, I encourage you to chat about it. But also, if you have questions, go ahead and put that into the chat, please.
Yeah.
So let's see what we have next, Mary.
Yeah. Oops, sorry.
No worries.
Yep.
So I just wanted to give all of you kind of the permission and create the space and tell you that right now is an opportunity for you to say no. Say no to people and projects that don't align with those goals, that don't align with those priorities. And there's a lot out there with how much we're all trying to do for our children. People are posting on social the amazing projects they're doing with their kids, or you're seeing a lot of people do really interesting things with their work, with their businesses. But what I will say there is there's a lot of power in no. There's a lot of power in saying, no, I will not be able to make that meeting, or no, I will not take on that low priority project right now. Because what you should be doing professionally is picking the high priority projects that are going to keep moving you forward.
Yeah. And I noticed that a lot of families here have teenagers, or even at least kids from 10 and up, and even for younger kids. But I think this is also a really strong opportunity to show your kids how you move through work, because the example that you actually enact can help them as they grow and mature as well. So what I mean by that is I've been very clear with my family and my children as to my priorities. And it's been really clear, like I'm showing up for people who need me right now. I'm going to be on a webinar tonight, and just communicating with them the priorities. My priority is to read to you every day. My priority is to make that time. This time you can expect to see me, and I won't have my work in front of me, and you will see me. And through these actions, we can really show our kids how to prioritize and how to say no to things. And I just think, especially for kids who are teenagers, having real discussions about what you're struggling with and just being open with those kinds of things, I think is a really great opportunity that we all have right now, because we have our kids here, so we can share that with them. Yeah, so I just wanted to respond in that way.
I think that's great. And remember, Mary and I, we chatted this morning, and I was telling her that there's a lot of studies, neuroscience is studying, obviously, the effect of what quarantine is doing and how it's affecting us. From my perspective, I look a lot more on the professional side. And so I share with Mary that there's a lot of studies showing us that if you have clear purpose, if you as a leader are giving purpose to your teams, if you as a professional have clear purpose as to your place in the organization, in business, in industry, then it's a lot easier to navigate the anxiety, the stress, and the change of what's going on now. Because what most people are experiencing now is a reduction in certainty, because we just don't know what's going to happen day to day, a reduction in connection, relatedness, because we can't see or touch many of our community. And so that's causing, obviously, a stress effect. And what science has shown us is that when we have a clear purpose, it makes dealing with that a lot easier. So I said to Mary, Mary, do you think that would work for kids? Do you want to share what you said to me?
Oh, 100%. I think it's so crucial for kids of all ages. And I notice many of you have very young children, and their purpose will look different than a teenager's purpose, let's say, but it's still a purpose nonetheless. And having, for example, that, that cleanup song that children play in their schools is really a way to give a very young child purpose, is we're going to put this toy away, or we're going to see the cause and effect of some material that you're using. That's definitely a purpose. So as you, of course, get older, your purpose is going to change. And I just wanted to remind parents, because I do feel like it's helpful just to remind yourself of where kids are in their development. And now's really the time to acquaint yourself back with that, that study. And so just to remind yourself that kids who are in the adolescent ages right now are really trying to form their identity. They're trying to understand, who am I? And so you can really tap into that with the purpose conversation and get at some of the qualities that they really do want to nurture. I think it's always something that I do when I'm parenting my kids. I am trying to think of, well, what am I trying to do here? Like, what's my end game with these kids anyway? And it's always kind of comes back to the same thing. I want to equip them with tools and skills and lots of love to fill them up, of course. And for teenagers right now, I just think they have a real position to do a lot. And I think we need to engage them beyond their distance learning classes, to connect with others and to really be social. And you really, as a parent, have to kind of facilitate this. But the purpose is there. It's in their innate development right now. So if you can kind of think about some of those things, I think it would be really helpful in helping you to get your kids, and we'll talk about it in a second, but it's just about getting your kids to have more to do. I think a very common sense of feedback I'm getting right now is that a lot of kids are feeling dysregulated, which is understandable. And a way to regulate is to do what Helen's talking about, which is to give purpose to what you're doing. And you feel more settled, right? I feel more settled when I have that priority list and I'm like, okay, I know what I'm going for today. It might not be successful in the end, but I know what I'm doing, right? So yeah, it's totally.
And for my 7-year-old, he's a second grader, very early on, I said to him, you have a job to do. And he looked at me with wide eyes and said, I do. And he was very excited because I don't know if you guys remember this, but I remember being excited about the idea of working and in being grown up like my parents. And so I said to him, yeah, he said, what's my job? I said, your job is to not fall behind on your development. Your job is to focus on your schooling, is to keep reading, is to stick to your routine, to keep moving. I said, I acknowledge that things are different, but your job is to keep up with that development. And that really stuck with him. I mean, he's 7 years old, and he's not like, he's not one of those kids that makes lists and is super organized, but this sense of purpose of, oh, I have a job. Dad goes to work every day. Mom goes to work. And, I said to him, you're going to have an office space and you're going to go to work every day and you're going to do that work.
Yeah.
And that really helped him.
Yeah. I think it's really helpful for certain. All right, let's go.
And what I'd like everyone to do is we want you to share with each other as well as to what's working with your children. So as you think about this idea of purpose, please put into the chat what has felt like a purpose for you, and also what kind of purpose have you seen your kids experience. So go ahead and put that into the chat and we'll share it as we get more feedback. Let's see if I can. Yeah, I can. So I want to talk briefly about visibility and impact at work. One of the things I think is really important is a lot of people feel like to get ahead, I need to work more. And I completely disagree with that. I think to get ahead, to recession-proof your career, to recession-proof your business, you need to have strong relationships with people that matter and people that are going to help you move forward. And you need to have visibility. So again, comes down to know your purpose and know your value. What is special about you? And then I want to give some like very concrete tactical things that you can do. So if you are joining video and you are, or there are video meetings that you have an option to join on video or to be off video, I want to encourage you as much as possible to be on video. Even if your cat is crawling on your shoulders, even if your baby's sitting in your lap, please, I would say don't worry about that. You know your culture better, but I think right now is actually everyone kind of gets a free pass, and people seeing your pets and your kids and your background, it connects them. It connects them to you. It shares, it builds empathy. They feel like they get to know you more personally. And certainly because you're physically visible, you're making some semblance of eye contact, people feel heard by you. So I know that there's a tendency to say, what if my baby runs in without, his clothes on? I would say you're going to get significantly more value than negativity if you have that video on. And then I also want to say that it's really imperative that you don't wait till something is done to share updates. Remember, like maybe if in the past you were going into an office or you were seeing people more often in person, you were able to kind of give them tidbits of where you are on things. Right now, that doesn't exist. So don't wait till something is finished to give an update to a manager or to a team. Say, this is where I am in the project. I think that's really imperative.
Yeah.
And share the personal and ask about them, right? Be vulnerable. This is a time that it's okay to be vulnerable.
That's so helpful. I really connect to that because I feel that when this all happened, I was actually kind of feeling nervous to get on camera to begin with, and I had to practice a lot. And now I'm actually feeling really comfortable that I've been on camera every single day, multiple times a day, practicing talking. And I know I have improvements to make still, but it's more comfortable now. And I do feel that I really love it when my team members send me little videos, or, if I have something to say to connect to those that I serve. I love putting a video out there right now because it does feel as though they're just connecting to me, really, because I'm sort of right there. Hi. So I also think that now is a really good time. Some people I know are not working perhaps right now. I know some people's jobs have gone away, or they're not actually currently employed by anyone. And so I think a really, really good use of time right now is to get comfortable producing content that really shows your worth and really connecting to those you're hoping to get a contract from or to share, information, because you never know who's going to see it and then think of you if there's a problem to solve, or if you don't have a website. Like I know right now, one of the members here, Susan, is a friend of mine, and we were just talking yesterday about how important it is to have a website and to have a footprint on the web. So now today, it's a really good time to get those things in order so that you can go to any future employer and you can say, look, like this is all, even though I was in quarantine, look at all of the things that I was able to do. Or if you're not going to be going for a job, you're using this time to really add to your professional equity by producing and learning new skills and all of the things that you're hopefully going to be inspired to do. So just, a connection there. Yeah.
I think that's so valid, Mary. And it made me think of somebody I know that lost her job just, 2 weeks before everything went crazy. And so it's tempting to think, well, I've got these 3 kids to take care of and nobody's hiring right now, so I'm going to do nothing. But actually she's in the financial services space and the markets were crashing like crazy at the time. And she's an expert in a certain area. And she thought, well, if I was at the job right now, I'd be getting hundreds of calls with questions as to my view. So she went out on LinkedIn. She doesn't have a website because she's more of a corporate professional, but she went out on LinkedIn and reached out to me and said, how do I put together a blog? I'm like, you don't need a blog. Just go and write on LinkedIn and your network will follow you. And she's had a great response. So I think there's a way to be visible even when you're not a business owner. If you are looking for a job, or if you feel like maybe a transition is right for you, start to produce that content and maybe even already put it out.
I love that. That's actually really creative. I didn't think about that before. So thanks. That's really helpful. I love that. Yeah.
And so many interesting comments are coming in through chat. So I want to bring our attention to that and read a few because we can learn from each other. So we see people sharing, I'm not trying to do everything myself. I'm tapping into my partner for help, dividing the chores, fun throughout the day so we can work and be present with the kids. Awesome. I love hearing that. What's working with the kids is spending time outside. I just jumped. Yep, spending time outside, explaining when I'll be able to focus on them and when I have to work. So setting those boundaries, so powerful. I'll be able to, and gratitude, practicing gratitude and talking about it at dinner. Ah, I love that. Mary, any that you want to pull out and share with us?
No, I was just saying, like, starting work before everyone wakes up. I totally relate to that because I just, this week, I actually went back to my roots of getting up early with swimming and just, you know, getting out, and I do a quick run and no one's out. It's just me and that's it. And then I come home and I'm, you know, ready to go. I get my work done, and then everyone kind of wakes up and I know I can give them an hour. I'm a big block time girl. I don't know if that phrase makes sense or if it is one, but I really block time on my calendar where I don't work and no one can book me because I'm with the kids and I'm doing stuff with them or for me, whatever. And, you know, then the other times the kids know that I'm going to be working and they can't really count on me for things. So that will bring us to the next part of the conversation, but yeah. So.
Okay. So I think I clicked like 5 minutes ago and I finally switched. So what I want you to do now is just another quick exercise. Think about who's important to your success. And when I say that, it could be professional, but it could also be, you know, come back to those priorities. If something that is high on your priority is development for your children, who's important to that success? Is it a partner? Is it a family member? Is it you clearing up space to do that? Where is that? And how strong is that relationship? So if we take aside the you part, hopefully you have a strong relationship with yourself, and you focus on externally, do a little bit of a stakeholder mapping right now and think, okay, who are the 1 to 2 people that I really need to make are key to my success? And then how strong is that relationship right now? On a scale of 1 to 10, give it a score. And wherever you are, think about, where do I want to take it? If I'm at a 6, how do I get it to an 8? If I'm at a 2, how do I get it to a 5? And let's see, Mary, could you click for me to the next slide? Thank you. Okay, so for some reason during this time, I've been thinking a lot about my grandfather who was in World War II, and mostly just to share for myself to keep the perspective that these are hard times, but this is nothing like times that, you know, my grandparents went through. So I'm trying to experience gratitude and perspective, and it's really helped me. But one of the things that came up for me is I realized that a lot of people, when they go through crisis and stressful times, they bond. Even if it's, you know, you think about team building, usually when you do team building exercises, you make people compete and feel a little bit of stress, and then they bond over that. So know that this is the time to create that. So stop making assumptions that somebody doesn't want to talk to you or won't pick up the phone on you, and ask them, what's the best way to connect with you? How do you prefer to connect? What time of the day, right? Everyone's got a new arrangement. I was speaking with a gentleman that I was coaching, and he said, this guy will not do Zoom. He's a dinosaur. He was talking about one of his, you know, kind of stakeholders, and he will not pick up the phone on me because he's not a phone guy. And I said, well, how do you know? Like, things are so different now. Like, you guys used to be in the same office where you could walk down the hall. You have to ask the question. So when you think about building relationships, you have to ask the question. And that way, again, it reduces decision fatigue because you're not guessing, and you can start to create structure and boundaries and frameworks for yourself and for your family when you know how to deal with others.
This is so helpful. I think I was on a plight just before the COVID-19 where I was really starting to talk with my new staff and just ask them, like, how are things going? What do you need? Tell me. And I'm always a little bit surprised when asking people questions I really actually think I know the answer to. I've started to talk with my clients more through this process. Just, how are things going? Tell me more about what's your need. And everyone has a very different place that they're coming to this all from. So I think it's so true that you can't really assume anyone's vantage point or willingness, or even like how much they've changed. I know that my father, for instance, like never used to do FaceTime or any of those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Now it's like, no problem. We are like FaceTime champions, right? So people, it's a small story, but I'm sure you can understand. I know I've changed a lot over these past couple of weeks. I feel as though, again, you have to definitely make time. I loved your exercise of thinking of people that really are crucial to your success and making sure you're making time. That's such a good priority. What a good priority. It's great.
Mary, Megan's asking a really powerful question. Megan says, how do you manage being real and vulnerable, but still strong and stable as a small business employer?
That's really, really great question. I think that it's a balance, because I think you don't want to go out and only talk about what's so difficult, perhaps. I think, let me just say this. I think it depends on how you're portraying your vulnerabilities. I would say that you probably don't want to go out and say that you don't know what you're doing and things are really awful, and we're gonna show that side of vulnerability, right? But I think to the extent of just connecting around the difficult moments, and then of course pivoting to what you're doing about it, I think that's always actually a helpful piece of things. And I think that my experience in my company, at least, is that I feel like my clients who are also parents um, appreciate me saying, I got it. Like, I really understand what you're going through, because I have empathy for it. And I am not oversharing. I'm trying to set some boundaries there. So I'm not sharing like particulars about my son, or it's not about my son. It's not about my daughter. It's about your child. But I just can say simple things like, yes, it's a difficult time. Like, I'm going through a difficult time, and I know you are too. Let's talk about your child and what we can do here, because that's what this is about. So it's a great question. I think I've been thinking a lot about that, and I don't know if that's even my final answer, but some initial thoughts. What do you think? You probably have more
think you phrased it beautifully. I think
Yeah.
you phrased it beautifully. There's a fantastic book that probably many of you know, and it's by Brene Brown. It's called Daring Greatly.
I love
And it's all about vulnerability. And in one of her chapters, she talks about the fact that vulnerability isn't screaming out to the internet as to how anxious or ruined or sad or happy you are. It's not about that. It's about being real with other people with a true connection. So first, it's about how do you build that connection. And Mary talked about it's about the other person. So being vulnerable is being willing to ask a question. It's being willing to empathize. Mary was vulnerable earlier on the call when she said, I used to feel very uncomfortable out in front of a camera, and I've been challenging myself, and it's gotten easier. So that was a way of her being very strong, but also being very vulnerable. It was very real. So Megan, let us know if that answered your question. Hopefully it did.
Yeah, or we can dig in further if you need to.
Yeah, absolutely.
So another question is, how do we set boundaries with colleagues who don't have children and have all the time in the world? Wow, that's a big question.
Yes. Okay. So this is a really big one. So first of all, this is when vulnerability is very powerful. And if you have your video on in a Zoom meeting and your child has crawled on their lap, I can imagine that might feel very vulnerable and very scary for some people. but there's a level of empathy that starts to build with this person that has all the time in the world, that is trying new recipes every day or doing a million DIY projects and learning new habits when you are just trying to get by. So I do encourage you to actually share with them what's going on. And I have a story. I was working with a client who shared with me that he called a colleague of his. He actually texted a colleague of his saying, "Hey, do you have some time right now?" And the colleague replied, "If you really need me, what's going on? And is it urgent?" And he said, "No, it's not urgent. What's going on with you?" And he said, "Well, my son," this was a week ago, "my son just broke his leg and my wife had taken him to the hospital and now they're back. And now my wife went to strip down and shower, obviously, after being in the hospital. And I have my newborn and my son with a broken arm on my lap. So can this wait?" So I think that was almost like those two gentlemen probably wouldn't share such vulnerable, like personal stories with each other. But now is a time when you kind of need to almost open up and explain people what's going on with you. So
Right.
maybe you can say to that colleague that has unlimited access to of time and thinks you're available all the time, to say, "Hey, I want to be available to you and I want to make sure we get this done. Here are my blockout times. I've got my kid in school and I need to put him on Zoom calls here, here, and here." When we start to understand other people's perspectives, we develop empathy and compassion. Most human people, unless they are clinically psychopaths, develop empathy and compassion. So the more you're open with them, the more you tell them where your boundaries are, the more likely it will go well. Hopefully that answered your question. Let me know if it did.
Yeah, I thought that was great.
I see you moving the mouse, Mary.
I am doing it.
Okay.
Is that okay? Did you want to go back to that one?
No. I want people to see this.
Yes.
I want you to forget this phrase. There is so much going on. I don't want to bother them. And by them, I don't mean your children. You can bother them if you need to. I mean professionally, be it clients, managers, colleagues, team members. If you want to recession-proof your career or business, forget that phrase. That's all I have to say on that part.
Okay, I like that. To the point. All right. Okay, well, it's not easy. And I think one of the things I want to just say, first of all, is that what we're going through as working parents is an impossible venture if you think that every role that you're playing right now needs to be done at the same time, at the same level, with the same focus, with all of that. It's definitely like what Helen was talking about. We need to prioritize. We need to really use some tools here to make this work for you first and foremost, because it's almost like the oxygen mask theory. We need to put our oxygen masks on right now, and that's what you're doing tonight, so that's great, but you need to continue this. So if you kind of don't remember anything else of what I said, make sure Helen has a whole bunch of awesome advice for us. I just want you to know that you really do have to take care of yourself in this position, because it is very difficult to manage a tremendous amount of responsibility on both fronts. So what can help you with this? Because of course, I know you know what's challenging, but perhaps you haven't tried some of these tools. So the first thing is definitely plan ahead of time as much as you can. And just know also that your plans are likely going to evolve and change, just like Helen's stages evolved and changed for us as we were dealing with this crisis. Your plans are going to also change. A story around that is we have 3 children, and we decided to put them on a schedule where we have something called anchor activities. So unfortunately, my children are suspect to a lot of my work just because they are, but anchor activities it's also a great tool. So it's where you have an activity that happens at the same time every single day of quarantine. So it's not on weekends too. So in our house, we have breakfast at a time, we have lunch at a time, and we have dinner at a time. And then we also have chores for the whole family at a certain time. And then we have video games at a certain time. It's total lockdown time. And that way also my husband and I know those are the times when the house is going to be like super quiet. So if we have to speak to somebody and they need that quiet, uninterrupted time, that's a really good time for us to schedule. So, plan ahead of time. So with the chores, what I was going to say is that we had scheduled the chores initially in one way where we would circulate the chores every single day for the kids. And that got to be totally confusing for everyone. So we sat down about a couple days later and decided we would just marry a chore for a week's time, and then we would make a switch. So these are little things you can tweak for yourself, but it's certainly helpful when you have a plan ahead of time. At night, I also plan the next day for the kids if there's anything for school they need to do, just so that I don't have to do it in the morning. You definitely want to provide structure. And I know for me, that's not so fun. I would rather not have the same thing happening every single day. In fact, in my actual job, I never do the same thing every single day. So I really like that as an adult, but children really do need to do the same thing every day. And they need to do it at the same time every day. They need to go to bed the same time every day. And I would say even teenagers, although their schedules might be a bit later than the young guys, they still need to do things the same time every day. So they will be anchored by this, and you can use that anchor activity tip to help you with that part. Accountability is really helpful for everyone. So you really need to be clear with your kids. And we have meetings now. We never had this before, where we would like sit down as a family and talk about what the actual expectations are. And I think for older kids, it's really great to elicit that from them in partnership. With younger kids, you can certainly, I think, also do that, but maybe you have an idea in the back of your head. Okay. Definitely partner with support, even if it's virtual. So for example, right now, when both my husband and I are working, we do have someone that we can call in case my kids need help and I can't help them. They can get on the phone with somebody, which is really helpful. And that didn't really happen at first, but we realized that it needed to happen because, like Helen was saying, if you have too many people asking you for things at one time, it can become very taxing on your brain. So if you can just set up some supports for yourself for that, I think that would be really, really helpful. If you have any questions as I'm going along here, just put them in the chat, because I'll go and answer questions. I don't want this to just be lecture format,
Mary, but I think this is a really good opportunity. You're talking about, essentially delegating, like delegate some of your parenting responsibility to somebody else.
Yes.
I think you should talk about what Evolve does. And Evolve has a service right now that helps parents with this.
Yeah, it kind of came out of need from my family or a bunch of my other clients too. I was like, this is something, right? It's like, this is actually really something.
Yeah.
So it's, we named it like all day, every day. And it's just a really customized service for families. So they could basically contract with us, have a teacher. We just arrange whatever the family kind of needs, but it is a person that can be the person to basically outsource the questions, the tech issues. Sometimes like one of my kids just needs a little extra instruction during the day because that particular school does a lot of assignments. And then inevitably he ends up in the room where I'm working asking me while I'm on the phone, what is this question asking me to do? And I'm like, I just can't, I have to focus here. Right. So, that was a very, very helpful solution. So like everything in my life, it's custom. I mean, I can't like be not individualized, but it's clear when you're a working parent, like, listen, when I had a baby at home and I was trying to work, I had help in here because I couldn't actually be productive at work. And I didn't have an office at that time. I was just working from home. And I had to outsource that support because it's hard, again, going back to what I was saying before, you can't be working here and then taking care of your young child at the same time, right? I also started to institute, I'll get into the independence piece in a minute or two, but it's just, also really important that you talk about the I'll just get to this next point and then I'll get to there in a minute. Hold on. Okay. So let's talk about like the what ifs. So this is sort of in line with that, but you know, inevitably there's going to be what ifs. And I think Sarah was saying on her chat that she has activities for the kids to do if they get bored or, you know, they need something to do. There's like a list of things they can do. They can go to that list. I have that too. So that's a good one where they can take certain crafts out. I also started editing some of their toys so that they don't have everything downstairs anymore. They only have a couple of things. And then I just sort of cycle things into that space so that it gets a little bit new and fresh for them. So, and then if they have a question, and let's say somebody before this, what I was doing is I just had them write it down and then they could go on to the next thing. The only thing is I have one that doesn't read, and then I have one that does read, and then I have one that has LD. So it's hard for him to articulate sometimes his questions. So it, you know, it's not easy is my point. I'm being vulnerable, see?
Yeah. Mary, you have a really good question that just came in, and it was from Allison. She says, how do you handle children getting distracted by other websites and video games while doing schoolwork online?
So that's a great question. There is
Tell them you're watching them.
Yeah, you can, well, you can, yeah, that's true. You can be like, I saw you. No, you can also install in Google, the Chrome, there's extensions, and in the extension, you can just search, there's a whole bunch of them now, but there's focus extensions where it shuts down certain websites that tend to suck your time. And you're only then able to kind of work on that one website. So you can configure it so that your child can only be on certain school websites at certain hours of the day. Kids are pretty techie though. So if you have teenagers, I will say that all the teenagers that I've worked with always get around this. So it's if they want to, right? So it's probably better. I know Becky's on here. You're going to hear me say this, Becky, but it's probably better to go and get some support. I'm learning actually from Becky. Trevor and I are taking her class to learn some collaborative problem solving skills. So I'll email everybody the link to that resource, but it's definitely really important to partner with your child, I would say, rather than be sneaky and sort of plan A them. Becky will be laughing right now. So plan A just means that you're being very, I'm saying this probably wrong, Becky, but it's like top down. You're giving them the agenda rather than collaborating with them. And there's more to the story, but you can chat. Oh, there you go, Becky. Yes, excellent. Yes, collaborative problem solving all the way.
Yeah,
I'm a new parent.
Videos from
Yeah.
YouTube.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So Martha was saying, what is the name of the place that helps your kids with homework questions? And I said, well, that's you, right, Mary? Then you're going to share more info on a follow-up email.
Yes, I'll send that to you for sure. Yes. So that's my company is the one that does that. So we have teachers that we work with and employ, and it keeps them
can stay with your kid all day, right? They can kind of stay throughout the whole school day.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just helpful because I try to actually now work from literally 9 to 5. And so obviously I can't be with the kids during that time. So it's really important.
I do the same, and my son comes to me and he says, are you done yet? And I was like, well, did you look at the time? He's like, I know, but I want you to be done. And I'm like, I told you my work day ends on X. And he's like, okay, I'll wait till then.
Yeah.
So, and that structure is very helpful for him.
Yeah. And I don't really ever apologize to my kids about working. I think I saw somebody else say that too. And I feel like it's really important. Both my husband and I chose jobs that we really are so passionate about. And I had shared this publicly actually on a webinar that I did this week. And I said, my core belief is that we are all born with gifts, and it's our job to use those gifts to improve the lives of others. And, you also of course need to take care of your family. So that's where jobs come in, and you have to get paid for those things. And it's more complicated than just that, of course. But at the same time, I do want my kids to see that, there's a work ethic, and you show up, and yes, we're in quarantine, but you show up, you do your work. And that's what I expect of them too, with their schooling. Like you were saying, Helen, about your son. So we're walking the walk here. And
and it's very interesting.
Yeah,
it's very interesting.
Yeah.
Pre-quarantine, I used to go to my office, and then I'd come home, and my kids would ask me like how. I say my son because my other two, I have twins that are two, so they're not asking me much. So my older one, he says like, "Oh, how was your day? What did you have a client? What was their problem?" Because I'm a coach, so he always wants to hear the problem. And he kind of stopped asking that question when we went into quarantine because he wasn't seeing me work, because I was just, every time he came to me, I was distracted. And then when I started to set more boundaries, those questions came back. He was like, "What kind of challenges did you help your clients with?" And
Mm.
so I realized that I was doing something right because he was seeing me work again.
Yes, that's a great
Yeah.
story. I love that. Any other questions here? I'm just looking to see. Let's see. Oh, Susan, nice. I put a sign at the beginning. Yes, I have that too. On the
Yeah.
office door, a pink neon paper. It says, "Quiet, please. If this door is closed, I'm on calls or I'm emailing or writing." And I found they stopped knocking. I think that's really helpful, actually. I've done that too. I found that also. It's really
I
great.
saw on Instagram somebody posted a picture of a door with a couple of signs that said, "Most likely the answer to your question is an apple, ask dad," on the table. And it was like the answers to possible questions, which was very funny, but
That is
probably very true.
Yeah, yeah. So just lastly, I have a couple other points here, but be curious, I think is really important when you're working with your kids. Because you always want to kind of ask them, just as Helen was saying with your coworkers, you want to ask how things are going, or your clients and all of the people in your life, you want to ask and ask. But with your kids, you want to ask too, because honestly, those conversations will surprise you. And I'm bringing Becky up again, but I really went through this collaborative problem solving, thinking that my son was having a problem based on this reason that I had in my mind. And when we asked him what was up, so, in the first part of this, you ask your child that you notice they're having difficulty with blank, and then you say, "What's up?" And, she helped me learn that. And I asked him, and it was like this totally different reason that was so easy to fix, actually. And as soon as we fixed the problem, the behavior went away.
Yeah.
So it really taught me that there's such power in asking the kids about whatever it is that you're curious about. And you can use that to help you. So if the kid keeps bothering you like all the time in work, you can ask them what's up. Or if you have a child who's very, very young, because I know some people have very young kids, and I don't know that we're necessarily taking care of them as much, but right now it's really, really hands-on when it's you have a very young child. It's very physical to take care of them. So it's really certainly possible that a lot of the young kids are being dysregulated right now, and there's a disruption to the stimulus that they're getting, and it's challenging to keep a young child entertained in one space all of the time. It's part of the reason why when I had my kids and they were young, we were out of this apartment every single day exploring the city every day, because I found that to be very helpful. So I think for those parents who are very, dealing with very young children, the story is really quite different. I don't know if anyone here has young kids and wants to be like, yes, yes, me, in the chat. But I really think that, it's really, really hard. Listen, if you have school age kids and they can occupy themselves from 9 to 5, like in my house, and that's amazing, right? But if you have very young children, it can be really hard to get blocks of work done, and some days you can't. And so I've noticed a lot of families that have young kids, they have to then go to the working late at night after the kids are asleep. I mean, this can be really exhausting. So maybe the goal there is just to prioritize and bring your expectations down slightly. Talk with your team about your current, like Helen was saying, your current challenges, and share what you can do and what you feel is possible for you, and then kind of work backwards from there, so that you're not putting forth something that's totally unrealistic. Like I see this mom, she has 3 kids, yeah, but they're 12, 9 and 6, really different than a baby who needs you and will have every day something very different happening to them, and a very young child who's maybe preschool age, who's not going to nap one day but then nap the other the next day. So this is another challenge that I know a lot of families are having, and it's real. I know when I was on maternity leave, which I didn't take for very long, and then I worked part-time, and that was challenging. Anyway, all right, let me get to it, because we're almost at time and so much to talk about, and I have one more slide. Okay, So just here, building independence. So even your young kids, preschool, 2, 3, 4, they can all learn how to be independent. It just sort of depends on their developmental age and what's actually appropriate. And I took some notes for myself, so I would make sure I got it all right. So certainly if you're talking about a very young child, their independence is going to come through you modeling things for them, and then them kind of taking that and playing with it. You can applaud them for their time that they spend on their own doing certain things, and also notice when they're really getting into something and just sort of pull back a little bit. That's really helpful. As you get older, for an older child who's kind of mid-school age, it's really helpful just to teach them different ways that they can problem solve and they can actually move through their work. Provide them with real tangible responsibilities. Don't do tasks, do responsibilities. Like, your responsibility is to make sure that this space here gets cleaned up. And this is sort of how we do that. And then allow them to exist in that space. Scheduling independent play, work, and time. Again, I talked about the the collaborative problem solving. And then the last point I just want to make is I think now is a really important and helpful time to teach kids to cope with adversity. You can share how you're doing that, hopefully helpfully. But certainly, our older kids are really challenged right now because they're not in school, they miss their friends, they're not doing their sports, and perhaps you can share some things that you do when you're coping with adversity. I started going on some walks in the neighborhood with my son. That was very helpful. What are you all doing to cope with adversity with your kids? Maybe you could share that in the chat for our last hurrah. Yeah, the third shift.
Mary, one thing I noticed is that depending, like, if you have an extroverted child, this is actually tougher for them because their energy builds from their surrounding and from their classmates. And my son is an extroverted kid, and I think this has been a real struggle with him. So we've taken away something that really gives them energy. So think about, where are your kids on that introvert extroverted spectrum, and what do they need? So something I've put into place is just allowing him to have structured FaceTime calls with his closest friends and his cousins that he can look forward to, because he's a different human being after those calls.
Yeah, for sure. That's really helpful. Yeah, I hear from the audience, it's like, third shift for me is 9 to 11 or midnight.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's hard. I think it's just self-care all the way. And you have to just also bring the expectations down a little bit during that time, for sure. Yeah.
Oh, I jumped. So I just wanted to share a quote that really resonates for me and for many of my clients. Be strong enough to stand alone, smart enough to know when you need help, and brave enough to ask for it. And that can mean so many different things. It can mean relying on your partner or older children or teachers or, tutors or coaches. But we really encourage you this time to connect and to reach out. And what I created in an effort to help is I have a campaign that I have launched since Corona hit, which is for every coaching session that a person buys, I gift a coaching session to a frontline worker, a healthcare worker, and also an educator, because I think our teachers, now I realize how special and impressive our teachers are. So I want to give back to them. So if that's something that you want to be a part of, let me know. I'll share a link to that in a follow-up email.
Yeah, thanks, Helen. That's so awesome. I participated in that, and it just feels so good. To be honest, it was actually like an hour in which I was like, wow, I really got to process. That was so helpful. So I want you guys, just in closing, you could think about just what are your takeaways from this webinar, and more specifically, what are you going to do differently starting tomorrow? So maybe you could share some things in this.
But let's put it in the chat. I find that when people actually are forced to write things down, put them into a community, they're much more likely to do it.
Writing everything down. I'm like,
so
paper girl.
We have 20 plus people on this call. Let's hear from each of you. one thing you're going to do differently tomorrow? What's a takeaway that you have? And we'll be reading them out loud as they come in.
Yeah, that's great.
Both of you have shown great ability to pivot into the moment and respond to our times. Thank you, Allison. That's very kind.
Yes.
I'm going to connect with my clients. Yay, Jennifer. See, she said it out loud, so it's expected. Thank you.
Happening. It's happening.
Setting the anchoring activity time. Excellent, Megan. Susan saying teaching the whole family time blocking, adding more anchoring meetings, and asking the kids to collaborate in decision making. Jaya saying don't apologize for to my children for working. Yeah, it's good for them.
I just want to say a quick thing there is just that my mother always worked during the time I was growing up. Not everyone did. I was almost like a little mad at certain points in my life that she was working, this and that, you know. But now that I'm actually older, I get a lot of fuel from that. I'm just like, and I really respect her. Like, I think it's just so cool that she's kept her career up all this time. She had 4 kids, like very cool, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Saying no to something, if it's not realistic for me to take it on without feeling stressed and not feeling guilty about saying no. Yeah. No is a big one. Now's the time. That's the time.
Keep the takeaways coming. We'll be reading them. And while we're doing that, Mary, if we could switch to the last slide.
Yeah, sure.
The last slide. So people are saying keep more video chatting while working instead of trying to keep work and home separate. They're not, because I'm not one without the other. Exactly. Wonderful, Janine. Time blocking, establishing responsibilities, assigning job roles to my kids. Wow, there's so many that came in. This is excellent. Martha, thank you. Trying to find boundaries so that my son knows when to not ask questions, have more of a routine, not apologize for working a lot.
Love it.
You know, one of the things about this working a lot and apologizing, it's, first of all, it's got to come from within you. You have to work. If guilt is a part of your day, you go back to that priorities exercise so that you're very clear on what your priorities. And when you're clear on your priorities, then when you are saying no to your kids or you're creating boundaries, it's easier because you've kind of laid that out for yourself. And the guilt will hopefully be reduced. And also, if you're saying no to them, tell them, you could frame it differently. You could say, right now, it's not possible, but why don't we come up with a fun thing we're going to do at a later time and have that and have them come up with it.
Yeah.
You know, because oftentimes as parents, we overcomplicate what we're going to do with them. We're going to have some fancy science project where rockets are flying or whatever. Like I remember I had this vision that that's what my son wanted from me. And I said, what do you need from me? He said, I want you to just sit and give me the Lego pieces so I can build. Just be near me and give me the Lego.
Sometimes the answer to the question is actually like really, that's what I'm saying, really simple. So you just have to ask. I love this. Someone says, add a few breaks into my day to check in with the children. They typically come after work. So maybe give them a little more time. Yeah, I try to do that, like just giving a couple of blocks of time during the day. That's great. Kids are not affected by how much you work. They're affected by how much guilt you have.
Wow, beautifully said.
Real statement. I love that. So good.
I just feel that, Sarah. Thank you.
Activities, being vulnerable and open with coworkers. I love that. Yeah. And just sharing with your coworkers. Like I build a culture in my company where I'm always like, you know, I want everyone to have a full life. So even though you don't have children, which many of my teachers don't have children yet, it's really important that they know that what I expect of them is to not just be doing this. And I'm not just doing this either. And so it's just having that culture and that conversation is really important. You can never like have that enough. So good. Yeah. Visuals about anchor activities, being, anchor activities is a good one. Love that.
Yeah,
I stole it from someone else. I'm just going to say for the young moms, there's a woman named Dana Rosenblum. If you haven't checked her out, she's on Facebook and such, but she's a great resource for young, younger parents. And I stole it from her. So I've given her credit, telling you.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I think when it comes to vulnerability, I wanted to make a mental note to share this. If you are more in a corporate environment where you're dealing with a certain culture and senior people or people that maybe don't have kids, a lot of leaders are coming to me, heads of HR, senior managers of large departments, coming to me and saying, what do I do here as a leader to keep my team engaged, to keep my people working well, but also feeling like I have their back. And even the kind of leaders that typically weren't really thinking about their leadership are thinking about that. And what they're learning, and what of course I'm helping them through, is that they're realizing that it's not about the professional you and the personal you, that the two are mending together, and that they need to create an opportunity for you to be vulnerable and open. So your leaders are thinking about that. If you're a leader in an organization, you're probably thinking about it, or you should be. So this is the perfect time to be more vulnerable. And Carolyn talks about that: be more vulnerable, open with my coworkers. You have an excuse to do that now, and it will bond you for later when things go back to normal, hopefully sooner than later.
That's great. I love that as an ending point. That's so
Mm-hmm.
fabulous. I really hope everyone here just takes this in and tries to be good to themselves going forward to tomorrow. We have a lot of really nice action items that you're holding on to, and I've got my own too. So I'm excited about that. And
Yes.
this was great. I'm really happy that we were able to connect with everyone tonight.
We hope this was helpful. Please connect with us on LinkedIn or Instagram or Facebook, because we're constantly sharing tips and updates. Mary more focused on the education. I'm more focused on the professional and leadership and visibility. But we hope that this was useful. Please share your feedback with us, and we'll send some follow-up helpful information as well.
Yes, for sure. Thank you, everyone. Have a very good evening. Thanks for staying a few extra.